Welcome to the regular meeting of Council, Town of Oliver, Tuesday, April 14th, 2020. I'll call the meeting to order. Are there any late items to add to the agenda?
No, we have no late items. Thank you.
Thank you. Then I will call for a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated.
Moved.
Moved. Second, please.
Second.
I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is adopted. Moving to rise and report. In a special closed meeting held on April 6, 2020, Council directed staff to bring forward changes to the 2020 property tax budget and utility rates to support taxpayers and citizens facing financial hardship. The changes include deferring the 4% water utility tax increase approved for 2020, reducing the 9% property tax increase approved for 2020 to nil, using funds from the reserve accounts to allow for a 50% reduction for the first quarter utility bill for 2020, and also to enter into an essential services mutual aid agreement with adjacent municipalities and the RDOS during the COVID-19 pandemic. Adoption of prior minutes. Adoption of March 23rd, 2020 regular open council meeting minutes. Can I get a mover to adopt those minutes?
Moved.
Moved. Seconded, please.
Second.
Second, thank you. I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Moving to water matters. First item, Gallagher Lake Water Siphon Temporary Borrowing Bylaw 1392. This bylaw is for adoption. I'll pass it over to the CFO, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. This bylaw is the bylaw to authorize the borrowing, the long-term borrowing of the Gallagher Lake Water Siphon loan authorization has been approved by the province. Therefore, now this temporary borrowing bylaw, which is going to be used to finance the cash flow for this project once it gets up and going in full construction. It has certainly started already, but not in full construction. So we're anticipating definitely using this bylaw, and the bylaw is $6.48 million. Hopefully we don't have to use all that money during that time. It's as I explained, it's to manage the cash both as we're making payments to the various contractors, etc. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, CFO. CAO, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do. I have put an email into the province to request the process that we have to go through to get the $5 million from them. Seems how we have now met all the requirements that they requested when they allotted the $5 million to us. So I am awaiting a reply back from Liam from the ministry.
Thank you. Any comments, questions on this, Council, before we call for a motion? Councillor Michelle?
Yeah, Your Worship, I would presume that the final borrowing, once we do all this through the CFO, will be determined by Council depending on how much we use from reserves, correct?
That's correct. At the final, through the chair, through the final borrowing, when we finally get a costing, or should I say a reconciliation of all the costs, all the revenues, etc., then a report will be coming forward to Council and to make a final draw on our whether we do with reserves or water rates or the long-term borrowing.
Sounds good.
Not seeing any more comments. Can I get a mover of the motion that Gallagher Lake Water Siphon Temporary Borrowing Bylaw 1392 be adopted?
So moved.
Moved.
Second.
I heard a second. Any further comments, questions, Council? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Does anybody object to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Moving to item 2, Water Regulation Amendment Bylaw 1351.07. I'll pass it over to the CFO, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. My report outlines the direction that council gave to staff to bring forward support for the community. There was a large discussion what that support to the community could look like in times as such as these with the COVID-19. One of the directions that council gave to staff was to look at decreasing the water rates, or first of all, holding the water rates at the same level as 2019. Originally, back in December, council had adopted a bylaw to increase the water rates by 4% for 2020. When we adopt the bylaw, that will be rescinding those rate increases as well. Council then moved forward and suggested that providing a rate credit of 50% for the first quarter billing for all users of the water utility. And this report is outlining the costs of providing that rate credit. And for the metered water users, it's approximately $135,000, as well as irrigation water is being included as well. That rate credit is going to be $85,000. So that total cost to the utility is approximately $220,000, of which at this point in time, we are going to amend the bylaw, the Financial Plan Bylaw, to reflect a lowering the transfer to the capital reserve for the 2020 fiscal year. But in actuality, what will happen is when the final results of our 2020 year-end actuals come in, then we will be in a better position to actually know the true amount that's going to be negatively impacted into that water capital reserve. But at this point in time, the rate credit itself is going to impact our 2020 rates approximately $220,000. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks, CFO. Any comments, questions, Council? Councillor Michelle?
Your Worship, through to the CFO, I'm just curious if this could be done in 2 stages. I think Council is aware that I'm not in favor of one and I'm in favor of the other one. I don't know, could we make it 2 motions? Because I am definitely in favor of foregoing the 4% increase that we had planned for this year. I think that to make that up in the future, that over the next 4 years, it would only require a further 1% increase per year. I think that that's what we should do. I wasn't in favor of the other portion of it, and I won't be again today because I feel that it's just too, well, first of all, it's really probably not necessary. I think we're probably one of the only communities in the province that's going to end up doing this. And I don't know why we want to burden our future taxpayers with quite a large increase to make that up, because according to my calculations, it's about 7% that we'll have to increase in the future just for that one item. And we're going to have to increase our water rates anyway for all of our capital projects that we want to do. To me, it doesn't make, it's going to be very difficult for taxpayers going forward. I just don't think that that's necessary. So the question is, could we divide it into 2? Because I'm definitely in favor of holding the rates to the 2019. I said that before, but I'm not in favor of the foregoing the utility or that portion of the increase for the first quarter, because it's about $220,000 it's going to cost the water fund, and I just don't think we need to do that. So that's the question. Can we divide it into 2?
CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. The question before Council right now is whether or not you want to adopt the bylaw. With respect to the other part, you already determined that at the last meeting when you chose to provide that 50% reduction. That was already direction given with regards to that. So this is just the adoption of the bylaw to remove the 4%, and you can't really break those into 2 things.
But this is the actual in public vote that we're doing on this is right now. I mean, the other one was an in-camera meeting. Actually, I had a question to the while that popped into my head. I've had 2 or 3 people ask me that when council had those discussions, they were in camera, obviously, why we had them in camera. And I think I asked that question during the meeting, but usually we have a statement of the chair at the start of the meeting, pertaining to, and I couldn't really answer the question. So maybe the CAO could answer that question for me so that I can phone these people back and let them know why that was in camera, because there's certain regulations that municipalities have to abide by to what is in camera and what isn't. And I promised that I'd get that answer. And back to this other thing of like I say, that the actual adoption is today, even though the council determined that's what they were going to do. So if there's a way to vote on the 2 separate ones, I'd like to have that. If not, then I'll just vote accordingly to what the bylaw is.
Through the
CAO?
chair,
Yeah.
the meeting that we had where direction was given to staff was there was a number of items that were labor related that possibly there was discussions that shouldn't be in public. So that's why the meeting was in closed. And the direction that was given to council at that point in time, because there were a number of options with regards to what could be done to go forward to assist the people at this point in time. And this is the direction that was given to staff to go forward with by council.
That's fine. I guess what we should have done at the time, because is maybe had 2 separate meetings, had a regular meeting and an in-camera one, because I understand the sensitivity of the labor portion of it. But the other portion, the budget portion is basically public, but it's too late, water under the bridge. So I'll give the people that answer. I'll let them know that there was
that question.
Sure.
Or that statement. That's why you had a rise and report out of that meeting, because those decisions were made. And so you did an instant rise and report out of it, which is made them all very public right away. And
That's
the
fine, but
mayor put a note out on that.
no argument. I think usually when we have budget discussions though as a council, I can never ever remember them being in camera. So that anyway, I've got the answer and I'll tell those people that's the answer. Back to this other thing, we are adopting today. We didn't adopt at that meeting. So I once again asked him to be separated out, and I guess the CFO could tell me that, or the CAO. If not, then that's fine. I'll just vote as it is, because I really am in favor of foregoing the increase this year. I think, like I said before, it's only 1% over the next 4 years that we'll have to make that up, and it won't put our taxpayers in a hardship, because I think trying to increase that 4 plus the 7% is 11%, and we're going to have to make that up somehow unless we don't do the capital projects. So I mean, can we do it separately or not? If not, then I guess that's the answer.
CFO?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I'll kind of need the assistance of the of CAO as well. But one of the reasons that it's coming forward in this order, it's unusual that the regulatory bylaw and the rates bylaw for the water will come before the budget bylaw. Usually the budget bylaw would come first, and then within that budget bylaw would have the structure for the rates and the various, and just the way our meeting structure is done through the procedural bylaw, we have this item on the agenda at Water Matters first. So it's a little bit out of order in my opinion, because really the budget bylaw should have been passed before the rates bylaw. But regardless, the CAO can help me out. I don't personally see any reason why if a member of council wants to bring forward a amendment to a motion or to a report or make a motion, it's well within their purview, and then council can certainly debate it and do with it as they see fit. Thank you.
I thought I saw Councillor Mattis have his hand up at one point.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to follow along with that, at this point, we're dealing with a bylaw here. So what we would be doing is, rather than adopting it, we would be doing a first reading of an amended bylaw. So we'd have to amend the bylaw in order to do the first reading, second reading. I'm not sure that we have that capability to amend the bylaw on the spot today. So that means it would have to come back in order to separate the two items. This is a bylaw, it's not a resolution.
Right. CAO, you have any comments on that?
Council has, the CFO was correct. Council has the ability to put forward any motion that they wish and have a discussion around that. But the bylaw itself it's setting the rates for this year, and it does have the first quarter broken out to the amount that was requested by council. So you can't separate the bylaw per se. It's setting the rates, and we are getting ready to send out the bills for the first quarter. We are holding off on it. They should have already been out, but we are holding off on it, waiting for this to be adopted so that we can put the proper amount on bills.
Councillor Michelle?
I think that it sounds like it would be a little more cumbersome because we'd have to come back, and timeline wise, it might be a problem. So I don't see an issue with voting on the bylaw. I hopefully when I vote, and I think the rest of council knows how I'm going to vote, that I can somehow make my vote with a statement that I'm definitely in favor of with part of it, because I really am. I mean, that was my suggestion, and I like that part of it, but I don't like the other part. So I don't know how we could do that, because if it can't be done, well, then it can't be done. I'll just vote accordingly. That's all.
Any further comments, questions, council?
I have one question.
Councillor Shadu?
So I'm just looking at the Schedule A, water fees and charges. I know that we said when we were going to talk about irrigation water that we would come back to it at a later date.
No,
But we did mention that the irrigation water, they did need that first quarter, the 50% reduction, if that's what we were doing for the domestic water. I just don't see any changes.
it's in there. It's in there.
Is it saying for the first quarter it's 210 per acre, and even for April 1st to 31st, December 31st, it's still 210 per acre. But I see all the other ones that have made that adjustment.
Councillor Michelle?
Your worship, I believe that's in there because in the CFO's report, that's the $85,000, correct, CFO?
Yeah.
So it is in there, Paul.
Okay. I saw it in the report, but I just didn't see it on the actual Schedule A.
Yeah, and I'll explain that through the chair. The reason why it's a little bit different, if you notice above, it says water meter per quarter, and because of course the farm irrigation is billed annually. I can't show you the previous year rate, but if I showed you the previous year rate, you would see the reduction. So yes, we have reduced the irrigation to the same level of revenue that the domestic was reduced as well.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
Any further comments? Then we have a motion, the Water Regulation Amendment Bylaw 1351.07 be read a first, second, and third time and be adopted. Do I have a mover?
So moved.
Moved. Councillor Grice?
Second.
Seconded. Any further comments, questions? Councillor Michelle, do you see the comment added there at the bottom of the screen?
I can't see it, your worship, because on my iPad, which I've got the live stream going so that I'd be able to see that, I can't pick that up. So maybe let me just pick up my phone and see if I can see it here. Hang on. Sorry. See if it's gone on these split screens. No, I don't have it.
You
I
have
don't
it?
have it anywhere. I don't have it anywhere. No, it's not coming
Okay.
up. If you could read it, it'd be nice.
Yeah, the comment says Water Councillor Michelle supports deferring the 4% utility increase approved for in 2020, however, not the 50% reduction in the first quarter utility bill for 2020.
That's fine. It's in there as a comment. Then I'll just vote accordingly now and go ahead and ask for the vote, and I'll vote against it. But at least my comments are in there because I am in favor of that portion of it, your worship.
Okay. If I'm not hearing any further comments, questions, I will ask the question. Does anyone object to the motion?
I do.
Councillor Michelle, object.
Excuse
CAO?
me. Thank you. This has to be unanimously passed, and if it's not, then it has to go down to the province.
That's fine. We've had that before happen, Your Worship,
Okay.
and it'll just go to the province. It's no big deal.
There's
If
going
so-
to be a delay in sending out the bills.
I feel very strongly, so I guess there's going to be a delay.
Okay, motion is carried. Moving to item F3, 2020 to 2024 Financial Plan Bylaw 1396. I will pass it over to the CFO, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just scrolling here. This is the Financial Plan Bylaw. Is that where we're at? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
2020.
Right. Okay. With the change to the utility rates bylaws, or rates, I should say, that is being suggested, have been council provided direction to staff to make. Therefore, the Financial Plan Bylaw that was adopted back, I believe it was either late February, early March, needs to be amended accordingly. And what the implications are that the tax increase will be reduced to nil, to zero, from the previous approved 9% increase. The water rates will be reduced to 2019 levels and eliminate the 4% increase that was previously approved for 2020. That water customers receive a 50% rate credit for the first quarter billing. That sewer customers receive a 50% rate credit for the first quarter billing, as well that the garbage and recycling customers receive a 50% credit for the first quarter billing, as well as, and finally, the utility billing due date for the first quarter billing be extended until the third week in July. And the impact financially, the report goes on to identify what the 9% was being utilized. This was the third year of five increases of 9% to accommodate the impact of the policing contract in approximately 2022, when the municipality reaches a population of 5,000. It also impacts the water fund, as I've mentioned previously, and just in the last item on the agenda, how much it impacted our reserves there, as well as the sewer fund. The rate increase of 2% for 2020, we will be going with that. That has not changed. However, there will be a 50% credit for domestic customers of the town sewer system, and that will be applied to the first quarter billing. And that credit is expected to be in the neighborhood in total of about $100,000, which means that our budgeted transfer to our reserves will be reduced by that, as well as the solid waste fees. The council adopted a $5 increase to the solid waste fees for 2020. That position has not changed. However, a 50% rate credit for all users will be applied and be to the first quarter billing. This credit is expected to be approximately $30,000. The report further goes on just to identify in background. This was direction provided by council, primarily to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak, as well as it's to be mentioned that council has limited ability from a taxation and from a user fee point of view in the town of Oliver for the tools in the toolbox, how they can help their community out. This is certainly I wouldn't say drastic step. However, it is certainly hopefully it will provide some support to various sectors of the community who are struggling financially in very difficult times. And with that, Your Worship, I'll pass it back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, CFO. CAO, you had your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm sorry, we have to go back to the last motion because it was for adoption. You can only give it 3 readings because it was not unanimous. I'm sorry. So
Okay.
you might have to reconsider that resolution.
Okay.
Mayor, it's Councillor Ventimilla.
Councillor Ventimilla. Yeah.
Thanks. I stuck my hand up before, but it's that tiny little icon. So seeing as we're going back to the, we're going back a step, I did have a question after that last vote. And seeing as we now have to reconsider, I just would like to know, so that we're all aware of what the consequences of it not being a unanimous vote are. The CAO did mention that that means that the bylaw has to go to the province for approval, which will put in a bit of a delay, and our water bills won't be able to go up. So I'm wondering, just based on history, if we have it, how much of a delay that we think that will cause, and when we can expect the first quarter, I guess, utility bills to go out then.
CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. It could take 2 months.
So if I may follow up, does that mean, and I said utility bills because it's all of the utilities together. So what would that mean then? Does that mean that we're going to continue to send out the other utilities for the end of April and hold off on the water until we're able to, or hold off on the whole lump sum and send it out as one as we normally do? I would like to really understand the consequences of it not being a unanimous vote before we re-vote now that we have to.
Okay, so there's a lot of the utility bill. I'm not sure how easy it is to manipulate it again so that there's no water attached to it. I'm going to refer this to our CFO.
Thank you, Your Worship. We certainly have to do some testing to see the ability to send out just the garbage and the garbage recycling and sewer side, because basically what we would be doing is zeroing out the water portion of those bills. I'm sure it can be done. It would, it's going to take some work, but it certainly could be done. At the end of the day, then I guess we have to come to grips with, is it make more business sense if it's going to take that long for a water rate bill, just to send out basically a 6-month bill for water, and when will be in July sometime, and move forward with our solid waste and recycling, because otherwise we're doubling up postage, etc. So if it's council's wishes, I believe we can. I'd have to talk to our finance people there and just make sure I'm not talking out of turn, but I think we could do it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Clarification through to the CAO. Is this a situation that, as a result of the change that the province has made due to COVID, or because of the fact that it has to go for review at the province? Was the COVID rule that it has to be unanimous in order for it to be adopted in the same meeting?
No, no, it's not. It's the unanimous vote is after first. For the water rates bylaw, the first 3 readings have to be unanimous before you can adopt it. And that's what we're following, is the rules underneath our water rates bylaw and what the province has indicated. So because it wasn't unanimous, the province gets it now to review it to see if it's too onerous on the public.
Understood.
Councillor Grice.
Thank you, Your Worship. So through to Councillor Michelle, seeing how the vote has gone and knowing that this will probably eventually get passed to the province anyways, this is going through with your comments, you're in favor of half of it, but not in half of it. I mean, I think it would be of great detriment to the residents of Oliver to not see this go through unanimously and have this delay. So I would just implore that you vote in favor with your comments that you're only in favor of half of this. Thank you.
Councillor Michelle, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did, Your Worship. I think before we jump the gun here, we should actually find out, maybe make a phone call to the province, and it might not take 2 months. I don't know how long it takes, because we have to do this every fall. I mean, this isn't the first time we've done this. We have to do this every year when we do water budget. And I don't believe that it takes 2 months to get an answer from them. I mean, you know, before I reverse it, I mean, if in a week from now it comes back that the answer is that it's going to take 2 months or whatever, then I'll relinquish. But I think we should make that phone call first to see if we can expedite that decision. I mean, it's basically, it has to be sent, and then whoever at the province has to approve it, and that's it. So, I mean, I think with a phone call, maybe yourself, Your Worship, or for the CAO, to see if we could expedite that. And if we can't expedite that in a week from now, 3 or 4 days from now, a week from now, we're told it's going to take a lot longer, then maybe I'll reconsider that. But I'm not just going to relinquish it, because I really do feel strongly we're making a huge mistake. We're burdening our future taxpayers unreasonably. So I think we should go through that one step first, maybe hold off for a few days then or whatever, make that phone call, either yourself or the CAO. And if they can expedite that decision, that's fine. If not, then we'll just come back and reconvene another meeting, and I'll change my mind.
Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you. So just for clarification, Councillor Michelle just mentioned that we have to do this every fall when we pass the water budget, but isn't it true that we only have to do this if the water budget is not unanimous? Because I don't, in the history of the water budgets that I've been a part of, I didn't think that we've ever sent any to the province.
That's correct. That's correct. And we've done it before. A couple of years ago it happened.
Yeah, not within the last 5. But I guess then I'll just have one more follow-up, if I may. I'd be interested to see how long it's going to take. But I think then we would need to have the next step of the further conversation. Do we hold off the whole utility bill? Do we try and figure out how to separate it? I mean, that's a whole other decision that would have to be made if we continue to have a non-unanimous vote.
Can I ask a question just as far as what's the impact on the town's cash flow by holding off on the utility bill?
Good question.
Through the chair, the cash flow for the first quarter utility bill was based upon 2019 for all the water, sewer, garbage was approximately, last year was $520,000 or $540,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. So as you'll see, I believe in my staff report here, as we somewhere, I can't remember where, I outlined the it's in the deferring of the tax rates that we're going to, or the tax due date. That's later in the agenda. I refer to our cash position, but certainly the cash flow, we were recommending to go to 50% credit. So that would have put a 50%. So it would have hurt our cash flow by about $260,000. So that's the type of money we're talking about right now.
So would an option be to send out the utility bill with the 50% credit on the sewer and garbage and bill the water at full rate, looking to give a 50% credit on the next bill? Is that an easier option?
Through the chair, it could be done. It's not that bylaw that you see in front of you right now. The bylaw that you have in front of you is showing the credit of 50% for the first quarter. So that bylaw would have to be amended. Certainly the water and sewer isn't as big of an issue because that can be dealt with separate, and that's a separate bylaw. But the water bylaw would have to be amended.
Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. I respect Councillor Michelle's position on this. But I did hear him say that he would be willing to do first, second, third reading, which would mean that we don't have to change any bylaws. If we did have to change bylaws, we'd have to come back in a couple of days anyways in order to do that at a special meeting. So maybe it's a situation where we could proceed with first, second, and third reading. The CAO could contact the province to determine what the actual time frame and how fast this could actually happen or not happen, as the case may be. And then we could again have a special meeting in 2 or 3 days in order to either have Councillor Michelle change his vote based on the circumstances, or wait for the province. And we would know that in a couple of days after the phone call. So I would suggest we should proceed with first, second, and third reading.
Yep.
Councillor Schwarzenberger. Oh, you're muted, Larry.
Sorry, thank you. I would not be in favor of waiting to give the water credit on the second quarter, because usually the second and third quarter are about 3 times the amount used in the first quarter, because everybody's watering their lawns, etc. So I think we gave this out so that we could help people right away. And I'm hoping we can go forward with it in a timely manner. Thank you, Your Worship.
All right, CAO.
Thank you,
Taking-
Your Worship. I'm just, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my words out. With respect to first, second, and third reading, I'm assuming that Councillor Michelle will be opposed to it. If he's not opposed to first, second, and third reading, then you can go for adoption, because it's at first, second, and third reading where you're opposed that we have to go to council or to the province. I have put an email into the province requesting how long it will take for them to review and look at the bylaw. So I don't know when I'll get that answer back.
Would a phone call expedite that?
I would say probably not, due to the fact that they're all very, very busy, and I get answers quicker via email with them right now than I do by phone. I go into a voicemail.
So basically we should hold the vote on first, second, and third reading and see what the results are and proceed from there. That's all we can do at this point.
That's correct.
Councillor Michelle.
Your Worship, I would, if we can delay adoption for a few days, then I would agree to vote in favor for first, second, and third reading. Because if I voted under normal procedures for first, second, and third, we could adopt that today. But I will agree to voting in favor of it. We'll go redo the vote, as long as we're not adopting it until we find out from the province whether they could expedite that. So in other words, delay final for a couple of days until we get an answer from the province.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
I'm good.
You're good? Okay. I see a second hand there.
Yep, me.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just thinking that perhaps if everybody agrees to adopting it at third reading, then there's no need for the province to come into this. So if you want to wait for adoption, why would you not consider postponing consideration of this bylaw until I receive information back from the province?
Okay.
And then you could make that decision at that point in time, rather than try to work around the process that has to happen. But please don't put in what I've put in, what I've suggested, because it's just for me to, I'm not somebody who is voting.
Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. If, and I believe that Councillor Michelle feels as strong as he does, he would have to vote against first, second, and third reading in order to make things happen the way that he wants things to happen. If he votes in favor, then council will be able to move toward adoption without him. So if he truly believes what he's saying, then he has to vote against first, second, and third reading in order to force the process to go to the province and come back in a couple of days for adoption or not adoption, as the case may be.
CAO?
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
I have my hand up.
Okay. Councillor Schwarzenberger?
Thank you, Worship. Well, since we've already voted on this and Councillor Michelle is opposed, and we're going to send it to the province, let's just do that. And if the CAO gets information back that it's going to take a month or longer, we can reconvene and ask if Councillor Michelle will reconsider his vote, and we'll vote on it again at that time. But we've already voted on this. It's already been opposed by one member of council, and it should just go forward, and we'll find out a timeline and then decide what to do.
I agree.
CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. What you voted on was first, second, third reading and adoption, which couldn't happen. So that's why you're reconsidering it. And it's just first, second, and third reading.
Yeah.
I will make the motion that Water Regulation Amendment Bylaw 1351.07 be read a first, second, and third time.
Didn't we already vote on this?
No, we're not adopting, Rick.
I'm
That's
a little
the change.
confused. I think I'm a little confused. I'm sorry, Your Worship.
Excuse
for
me?
interjecting.
Excuse me?
Yep.
What you
CEO?
first, sorry, procedurally wise, you have to reconsider first, second, third reading and adoption again, the same resolution. And it would have to be defeated, and then you have to go into the first, second, and third reading only.
Understood.
Okay?
I think, Your Worship, the Councillor Schwarzenberger's idea is a good idea. And if we get an answer that it's going to take a long period of time, then we reconvene a meeting and just have another vote on it. It might be 2 days. We might get an answer right away.
Rick, we can't do that procedurally.
Uh,
Because we've already voted for adoption, we have to rescind that and do the same thing without adoption. You cannot have adoption in the same motion unless it's unanimous.
Okay, well, then you're going to have another motion for just first, second, and third.
So then
right.
I will change the motion, then is that that Water Regulation Amendment Bylaw that has been read first, second, third time and adopted be rescinded.
CEO?
Okay. I'm just trying to get the procedure down correctly.
That's right.
So what you have to do under Robert's Rules of Order is reconsider that motion and possibly defeat it. And then you can put a new motion on.
There you go.
There you go.
So the mayor has to bring it forward for reconsideration.
No, you can do it in the same meeting,
Okay.
a couple of councillors.
So what do we have to do? Make a motion to that effect?
Yeah. That resolution 103 be reconsidered.
So I would make that motion that resolution 103 be reconsidered by council.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. And then what you have to do now is vote on that.
Okay, well, let's vote on that. I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion that resolution 103, 2020 be reconsidered?
I'm opposed.
Councillor Mattis is opposed.
Okay,
Well,
Motion
do we
carries.
not have to defeat the motion by opposing?
not
it?
yet, not yet. What you're doing is you're reconsidering it right now, Counselor
Okay.
Mattis.
Then I'll withdraw that opposition.
So it's carried.
That's carried.
It was
Okay,
carried.
so now what's happening is this motion is back up on the board as
First,
moved and
second,
seconded
third.
already. So all you have to do is reconsider on the main motion, or
We gotta revote.
reconsider motion 103. So it's just basically the same motion is there again. Diane?
Yeah.
And it's moved and seconded.
Right.
Already it's moved and seconded.
So now we have to defeat it.
Yeah, that's correct. It's moved and seconded. You've got proposed, it's not.
So we
proposed.
need it. So then we're waiting for discussion and a vote to defeat it.
You. Okay, there's really. Go.
We're going to vote on the same motion again, basically,
Yes.
knowing that we have to defeat it because we're not
Yes.
unanimous.
And then we're going to have a second motion for just first, second, and third, your worship. Is that the intent of what we're doing here? So that then we can
That is
find
it.
out with
Yeah.
it, so that we can find out within 3-4 days or whatever, if we're going to get an answer. Correct?
That's
Correct.
correct.
Okay, good.
I have my hand up.
Councillor Ventimiglia?
Nope. It's me.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Grace.
Okay. So just to be clear, all of us now have to vote against the motion that we're in favor of.
Just the majority.
No, it's just a majority.
Yeah, I'm not okay with that. Just to be clear. Thank you.
That's,
It's the only way it'll work procedurally.
Councillor Schwarzenberger, sorry,
That's the
CA.
only way we can get through this.
I have nothing to add, except this is stupid, if you ask me, but I'll continue along.
Well, I just, your worship, I have to make a comment about that because he's basically saying I'm stupid, and I believe quite
I am
strongly
not
that
saying
I've got to. No, but
Charles.
I think we have a responsibility as councillors to ensure that our organization, the town of Oliver, is in a strong financial position. And I also have a real responsibility to my taxpayers that they can afford to have future increases. And that's why I've made this decision. And I want to make that perfectly clear. Because unless we drop capital projects, we are going to have much larger increases in the future by making this decision. That's why I'm so strongly opposed to it. Okay, so don't insinuate that, please. And if we have to go through this procedure, then we have to go through this procedure. I'm sorry, but that's how I feel.
I think Councillor Schwarzenberger was saying.
If I may, your worship,
process.
if I may, your worship, I was not referring to Councillor Michelle, I was referring to the process.
Thank you, Larry.
And, many of us are in favor of giving this benefit to our taxpayers in the midst of a pandemic. And Councillor Michelle has his own views on that, and he's entitled to them. I am not saying that his views aren't valid. I'm just saying that I think the process is antiquated and shouldn't be this way. It shouldn't be this difficult to do something that we want to do for the citizens of this town.
CEO, did you have a comment?
no,
Okay. Does the motion need to be, it seems to be missing first and second.
be read a first, second, and third time and be adopted.
Right, it just says read a third time.
Your worship, if I may,
Yes,
let's
Councillor Michelle?
proceed with the vote. We'll find out if I'm still opposed to it.
We need to make sure we have the right motion in there.
Well, we've got the original motion back on the table as far as my
Yeah.
understanding of the situation.
Okay, now it is.
Councillor
That's fine.
Rice.
Thank you. So if we're going to wait and see if you're opposed to it, why would we all vote against the motion that we're in favor of? If like, are you going to vote unanimously? Like,
Call the vote.
We'll let him vote first.
I think I've made my point.
Call the vote.
Okay. Does anybody, I'll call the question. Does anybody object to the motion? Motion carries
Unanimously.
unanimously.
On that basis, your worship, I would make the motion that Water Regulation Amendment Bylaw 135107 be adopted.
It is.
We already
is.
adopted it.
Oh, it's all part of?
It's all
Okay.
part
Yeah.
of.
Okay, my mistake.
Moving on.
All right. We started on this one, 2020-2024 Financial Plan Bylaw 1396. And CFO, I'm not sure if you had finished your comments, but maybe refresh us where we were at.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I did finish my report, and then but some great discussion. As indicated, what the Financial Plan Bylaw Amendment Bylaw is proposing is that to roll back our 2020 tax increase that was previously approved, which was 9%, as well as the water rates that we just adopted, the rate credit, and also rolling back the increase back to 2019 levels, water rates, sewer rates, that rate credits were that we mentioned previously, and as well as extending the utility billing due date until the third week in July. Therefore, I will leave it at that, Council. I think we've had lots of discussion regarding this, and the most significant impact for the general fund, of course, is the deferral of the 9% tax increases, which will also have an impact on some of our capital programs that council and staff will be further looking into at future meetings. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any comments, questions, Council? Councilor Schwarzenberger?
I'm good.
You got still got your hand up.
I'll get it out of there.
Seeing no questions or comments.
Your worship, I had a question, Councillor
Yep,
Michelle.
Councilor Michelle.
Are we allowed, through the CFO, shouldn't we maybe separate this out? Because I think we're in a bit of a dangerous precedent here if water councillors vote on the in portion taxes that are, somehow we have to we can't be challenged by somebody by a member of the public. I don't want to see that happening, because the two water councillors will be effectively voting on the 9% as well. And we don't have any right whatsoever to vote on that.
Okay, through the CAO, I know from a procedural point of view, when we adopt our rates bylaw in December, we don't actually adopt the full budget, because the water budget, of course, is part of our overall town budget. So the budget that I'm bringing forward right now includes everything. So the water utility is included with this. So I'm not exactly sure procedurally of who votes on our overall budget. I would have assumed that it would have been water councillors as well. So I'll throw that back to Gail.
They voted on it at the last, when we first adopted it.
Okay,
It was underwater.
Okay. Any further comments before I call the question?
Yeah,
We need a
sorry.
motion. So,
Nope.
Councilor Bentamina?
Thank you. I'm not quick enough to get that raise hand sign up in there. In the implications, number 6, the utility billing due date for the first quarter billing be extended until the third week of July. The bills are still going. I thought that we had discussed and agreed that the bills would still have a due date of like their regular due date and just have the late penalties waived. So what date is going to be on the bills?
CEO?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the date that's going to be on the bill is the regular due date, not in July. there was, the motion was passed by council, well, got defeated to extend it to July by council at the last meeting. So it will be the normal date, 30 days after it goes out.
Okay, so just to clarify then, it's not in the recommendation, it's just in the implications, but number 6 is incorrect then.
Right.
Why don't we correct it?
Then if we're waiting for a motion, I would move the recommendation then.
I'll second.
Moved and second. And that discrepancy you noted, that'll be
Corrected?
corrected?
Yes, your worship.
Okay. Any further comments, questions? Then I'll call the question that the 5-year Financial Plan Bylaw 1396 be read a first, second, and third time and be adopted. I'll ask the question, does anyone object to the motion? Motion carries. Next item is the council policy review. I'll pass it over to the corporate officer whose report's attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a follow-up to previous meetings. Back in January 27th, 2019, Committee of the Whole meeting, Council was provided with a spreadsheet and attached all of the council policies. The direction from Council at that time was to bring back a selection of policies to allow Council opportunity to provide input on the policies, indicate if they wish to review, rescind, or repeal. Council, since that time, has continued to review policies, making recommendations to staff and identifying those that may be rescinded. The next set of 8 policies starts with use of council chambers through to events with alcohol arrangements. The first policy is use of council chamber. At this time, outside groups can use council chambers with a council member or a management staff member that sits as a representative. They're allowed to use chambers. The other points just indicate how the process for recommending use of the chambers. I looked at a couple of other policies from other municipalities. Couldn't really see a lot, but many do allow use of their chambers. Some charge to use it, larger municipalities that would have a larger chambers. And note, I noticed a couple allow for use if people wish to get married. Kind of a funny story. Somebody came in to get their pension notarized, and the woman who came in, she got married in this building 59 years ago. So she was a sweet little woman. And so I sort of showed her around town hall, but she couldn't remember whereabouts it was, but I thought it was kind of sweet. So the policy is really not a policy. It's just a listing of provisions. I can take council's comments on the policy, and we can tidy it up a little bit if you wish to continue with this policy. And I put it back to council.
Okay. Anybody have any comments on the use of council chamber policy? Doesn't appear so.
Thank you. The next policy before council is your council communication policy. At this point, I'm not suggesting any changes. This is a fairly brand new policy, which came into an effect November 25th, 2019. And this just outlines the purpose and scope and the procedures for council members who are communicating with the public. And I'll put it out to council for any comments at this time.
Anybody with any comments on this policy? Thoughts? Nope. Next one, corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The third policy is the council equipment information technology. This policy was brought into play July 11th, 2017. And that's when Oliver was moving to their meetings on a web-based format, and council members were issued iPads. So it's basically a process on how the equipment is issued, the iPads to the council members, as well as it noting that the mayor is allocated a smartphone. The equipment remains as the property of the town of Oliver. And at the conclusion of a council member's term, if they wish to retain that iPad, the chief financial officer would determine a fair market value for them to purchase it at what the rate would be. The smartphone isn't included in that policy. And just of note that the devices are subject to our records management policy. If council had any comment, I'll take it now.
Councilor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. I heard the note in their management policies. Is there another group of policies out there that are entitled management policies?
That regards to equipment?
Well, in regards to anything and everything, because I look at this as a management policy. Similarly, I didn't speak up earlier, but the use of council chambers, that's more of a management policy as opposed to a council policy.
There could be consideration to change that to an administrative policy from a council policy.
That's how I look at these things, is they're administrative policies. They're not council policies. You know, maybe I have it wrong, but I look at council policies as more about how do we form committees, that sort of thing. You know, we don't talk about specific trees in the town or that sort of thing as a council policy. Those are administrative policies. But that's just my view.
Thank you. We can definitely take a look at those and determine if they should be switched over. The next policy is the Oliver Downtown Advisory Committee terms of reference. Pardon me?
Hold up, corporate officer. I have a couple questions.
Oh, thank you.
I'm just wondering, in one section there, it says for the 2018-2021 term. So that should be at least 2022, but I'm wondering if this should be, you know, further than just this term, this policy. And the other question I had was just wondering why the smartphone and the iPad are not, like, it seems odd that you can buy the iPad, which also has a SIM card in it, but you can't buy the smartphone is not part of that. And I was just wondering the rationale for separating those two devices. It seems that the iPad is just as useful to be retained by the town for the next councillors or whoever, if positions change.
Through to your worship. When this policy was brought into play, it was when we were moving to a webcast service, which was starting in the 2018-2021 term of council. And so that group of council members were issued the iPad as well as the mayor. It was given a smartphone. At that time, those iPads were not equipped with SIM cards. The new term, when your council started, new iPads were purchased for each council member. And at that time, the decision was made to add the SIM cards to the iPad. So that's a little bit different from when the policy was first brought in. It was noted for that term just because I think that was the first year it was brought in with the webcasting service. But that policy, you know, maybe that's where a revision does need to be made and consideration now that we've moved to adding the SIM cards to the iPads.
Personally, I think it should probably be updated, maybe
Yes.
looking forward past this term as well, and also take into consideration some of the comments from Councillor Mattis.
Do you need a resolution to that effect?
Yes, please.
Yep, okay.
So then we would make the motion that staff be directed to update the council chambers and council equipment. Both, you can have, the order doesn't matter. And council equipment policies to reflect current practice and give consideration that they be changed to administrative policy.
Have a mover?
I'm moving it.
Okay. Second?
A second.
Seconded. Any further comments, questions, council? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Thanks, corporate officer. You can move to the next one, I guess.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. The next policy is the Downtown Advisory Committee Terms of Reference. There has been some prior discussion about the Oliver Downtown Advisory Committee Terms of Reference with respect to extending an invitation to the Arts Council, which we've made initial contact with them to consider appointing a member from their group to join this committee. As well, there was some vacancies, and those were advertised recently in the newspaper, and those appointments are ready to be brought forward to council for your consideration. As well, there was previous direction from council with regards to advisory committee policies in general, with respect to the terms of references and potentially amalgamating the advisory committee's terms of reference, their general statements, into one policy with potentially schedules for each different advisory committee attached to it. So those are notes that I have with respect to the Oliver Downtown Advisory Committee at this time. But if there was additional comments, I'd be happy to take them.
Any additional comments? So this one's coming back to us, corporate officer?
Yes, Your Worship, that will come back to you.
Okay.
Thank you. And just moving down. The last policy before council is the employee, or second last one is the employee code of conduct. This policy was brought into place, oh, it's hiding on my screen, November 23rd, 2018. Again, a fairly new policy. This policy outlines the purpose for Town of Oliver employees and ensuring that the public has confidence in the impartiality, independence, and integrity of town employees. Town of Oliver employees have all read the policy and signed the last page of the policy, which has been included in their personnel file. And any new employees, of course, is provided with the code of conduct for review and for signature. If you have any comments, I'll take them on this policy.
Any comments? I think we're good.
Thank you. And the last policy, oh no, this must be the second last one, the equipment fund. This was brought in by resolution May 27th, 1996. Has a number of goals which with regards to the equipment fund, with 4 principal goals: to provide a safe and reliable fleet, and to recover the actual costs for the services by levying a rental charge against the functions, and to be self-sufficient in charging rental rates, and to provide only equipment which is necessary for the efficient operation of municipal functions. Fortunately, the Director of Operations is not on the call, but if there's questions, I would be happy to take them. They may have to go to our CFO or our CAO for any comment, but I will take any comments that you have with regard to this policy.
Any comments? CFO, I would ask if you have any comments on this policy. Or sorry, Councillor Mattis, I missed you.
That's quite all right. Thank you, Your Worship. It was just basically, I look back through my notes from some months ago when I started this whole process with staff and council. And basically my motion on this, and I think the CFO will concur, is the motion that I had is that council policy titled Equipment Fund be combined with council policy titled Budget Policy. We have a fairly extensive budget policy that this can be included with. So it would just be an amendment to that existing policy and combine the two of them, because it's more of a procedure than a policy. I saw the CFO's head nodding, so I'm assuming he's in agreement because he's probably on mute.
Yeah, I am on mute. Through the chair, generally, Councillor Mattis is absolutely right. Generally, you don't see types of policies like this at council. These are actually processes and practices that are put in place. They're just good financial management of managing a fleet, of managing equipment pools. This is how you replace equipment, and you do it so it doesn't have a tremendous impact. I know, for example, we don't do that in our fire department, and that's of course how come every time we have to replace a piece of equipment or a vehicle in there, it becomes quite onerous and quite a budgetary struggle to deal with that. And we're a little bit unique because of course we have the rural fire department to deal with as well. But if we didn't have that, then I would certainly recommend having a equipment replacement reserve for those fire vehicles as well. But yeah, Councillor Mattis is quite right. I don't mean to be long-winded, but it's more of a process or a procedure. Thank you, Your Worship.
So I would go back to my initial motion, which was that council policy titled Equipment Fund be combined with, oh, there you go. Council policy titled Budget Policy. You could put the word policy after equipment fund, please, Dan.
Thank you.
Okay. Move. Do I have a seconded?
I'll second it just so we can move to discussion.
Thanks, Councillor Grace. You want to make a comment?
Yeah, so isn't combining it then keeping it as our policy? Wouldn't it make more sense for us to rescind it and then leave it to staff to put this into their procedures and just take it off of the as a council policy?
Well, once it's combined, then it would come back to be rescinded. You don't want to rescind the policy until you've put it into the new policy.
So you want to put it into a new policy and then rescind it?
And then rescind it after you've put it into the new policy. You don't want to rescind it first because then it's in Never Never Land.
CAO, you want to comment? That'd be the best way to move forward?
What you could do is direct that it be included within the budget policy and that it be rescinded so that It's going to go into the budget policy, and you can rescind the council equipment fund policy. But don't put that in until somebody
I don't
else
want to.
moves
I don't want to
that.
put it in until I see the new policy.
Yeah, well, we haven't adopted a new policy till we see it, so we probably shouldn't be rescinding anything until it all happens at the same time.
Exactly. You adopt one, rescind the other.
Sure.
Okay. Any further comments? I'll call the question that council equipment fund policy be combined with council policy titled budget policy and ask if there's anyone that objects to the motion. The motion is carried. And we got one more.
Yes,
paper up there.
thank you. I promise this is the last one.
Mhm.
This council policy was brought in January 23rd, 2012, events with alcohol arrangements policy. This policy sets forth procedures for arranging Town of Oliver events that serve alcohol and provide for safe transportation from events for council members, pardon me, staff and invited guests. The primary purpose of the policy is to promote responsible behavior at such events and to prevent any injury or property damage to attendees of such events and the general public. And then in the policy, it reads, there's a number of sections which talk about which events may serve alcohol, whether or not it requires management or council approval, any provincial regulations that must be followed. Again, no alcohol purchase for council members or staff members, and safe transportation, and with how the costs will be managed. Again, this is a fairly new policy, which is comprehensive, but I will take any comments that you have.
The only comment, oops, I've got a couple hands up here. I'll let them speak first. Councillor Mattis first.
Thank you, Your Worship. This particular policy brings back fond memories for me. It was done just prior to the Christmas party of the very first term that I served on council. I brought it forward basically at my very first meeting, and council came up with a policy at that point, which the public then got a hold of, and there was quite an uproar caused at the time before this particular policy was rewritten in order to meet the needs. There was some fear that the town was getting people drunk and then buying them taxis home, and it was caused quite the uproar at the time. So I'm happy with the policy the way it is. Nobody here would remember that. I don't think anyone here was on council with me at the time.
I remember it.
Well, yeah, Kathy would remember it. She was there.
There was two, says I got two hands raised, but all I can see is Councillor Mattis. Does anybody else want to speak to this? And the only question I have, and it goes back to my Kelowna days, and I know they shut it down pretty good there, that there was no events that were allowed to have alcohol on city properties. I know that we're still doing that here with at least our Christmas party at the works yards, and I'm just wondering if there's any liability that we're taking on by continuing to do that. That would just be a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is a liability that we take on, but we only allow it. They have to have a special events license for it. So, but there is always, you always take on liability when there's liquor served at any event.
Oh, I got some hands again. Councillor Mattis.
Yeah, the reason for this policy was exactly because of that liability. That in fact, because council had no policy in place whatsoever, and alcohol was being served at town events, so to speak, whether it be Christmas parties or otherwise, that we felt there was a real need to have a policy in place to eliminate that liability or because now we are saying, yes, you can consume alcohol at licensed events or licensed town events, but we will be giving you a ride home so that you can't crash your car and sue us. That's what the whole purpose of this policy was to eliminate that liability.
Thank you. Any other comments, council? I think we're good with policies for now, Corporate Officer.
Thank you very much.
Moving to the water quality report for March 2020. We don't have Sean here. Does anybody have any comments, questions coming out of that report?
I'll move receipt.
Moved, receipt, seconded. I heard a second. Any further comments? Hearing none, I'll ask the question. Does anybody object to the motion to receive the report? Motion is carried. Report from Water Councillor Sadhu. Anything to report, Water Councillor?
Nothing to report, Your Worship.
Thank you. And Water Councillor Michelle, anything to report?
That closed meeting, Your Worship, and then obviously this afternoon.
Thank you, Councillor Michelle. Moving to bylaws, sewer user rate amendment bylaw 1331.07 and solid waste services amendment bylaw 1292.04. I will pass it over to the CFO whose report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is in the same, in concert with the water and rate, not so much reduction, the credit for the first quarter reduction of the sewer and garbage. And it's just indicating that what council, if adopted, it will impact the sewer revenues by approximately $100,000, the solid waste revenues by about $30,000, and which will be drawn from reserves. And with that, I will leave it, turn it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any comments, questions, council, on this motion? Would anybody like to move it?
So move.
Move to Councillor Grace.
Second.
I heard a second. Any further comments, questions, council? Hearing none, I'll call the question that sewer user rate amendment bylaw 1331.07 and solid waste services amendment bylaw 1292.04 be read a first, second, and third time and be adopted. And I'll call the question. Does anybody object to the motion? Motion is carried. Next item of business, 2020 property tax due date. I'll pass it over to the CFO whose report's attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is coming forward at an unfortunate time in, I'm not going to get into the dynamics that are going on economically throughout certainly North America and the world. But anyway, a lot of municipalities, or many municipalities in British Columbia, have approached the province and are seeking to defer or move their tax due dates. Most municipalities in British Columbia, not all, but most, have a tax due date of right after Canada Day. It's usually July 2nd. And that is the town of Oliver's due date as well. And it has been for a number of years, with a 10% penalty being applied on any unpaid current taxes that are remaining after that July 2nd due date. As such, many municipalities have approached the province requesting that due date be moved, because that the due dates are set by bylaw by council. However, there are other ramifications of legislation. The school taxes are due, the police taxes due, the library tax. There's I'm missing one. The regional district requisition, that's due on April 1st. But regardless of that, many municipalities are pushing forward. I have contacted the district of, not the district, sorry, the town of Osoyoos is going to be moving their due date till September 18th. The district of Peachland, I'm not sure if they've actually adopted it yet. I did read, I believe on Castanet, that they're going to be moving their due date till September 2nd. So therefore, I'm providing council with two options, and one to be pretty open, or we leave the due date as is. One would be moving the due date to August 31st and changing the penalties from a 5% penalty, a 10% penalty to 2 5% penalties. One to be applied immediately after the due date, and the further 5% penalty would be usually it's closer to 90 days after. In this case, it would be either December 1, possibly December 31st, if we move the due date to September 30th. They do come with ramifications, obviously, financially. It certainly does impact our cash flow position at the town. As I indicate, currently, the town levies approximately $2.5 million when we actually send the tax notices out. We also have to pay the regional district $1.5 million, and that's due August 1. We also have to pay our school tax and our policing, and net of the homeowner grant claims. That is usually around $1 million, and that's due usually about the third week of July. We also have to pay a hospital district requisition to the regional hospital district, and that's $400,000, as well as a library requisition of around $200,000. So there are significant, yes, we take $2.5 million in. Over and above that, however, we also are collecting money for other jurisdictions that we have to pay that money out statutorily on specific due dates. And that's what is being requested of the provinces, to vary those due dates. And as you can well imagine, that is very difficult to do. And there's many pieces of legislation and enabling legislation that would have to be put in place to make that happen. So that the people down in Victoria are working very hard to accommodate the wishes of municipalities. And like I said, most municipalities are moving forward on their own, realizing that their businesses are suffering, their residents are, in some cases, are hurting from either being underemployed, unemployed, or just being laid off. As I indicated, our cash flow, we currently have $8.3 million in investment funds. And they do represent the reserve balances that we hold for various operating and capital needs. And we do have a $100,000 line of credit at our bank currently, which we don't usually have to utilize. But if we do move forward with moving our due date, then I would certainly recommend that we would be proposing to adopt a revenue anticipation bylaw under the community charter. Once again, all these facts that I'm laying out in my staff report are worst case scenario. If in fact that the due dates for school taxes, the regional district become so that we don't have to pay them on those days, it won't be as hard on our cash flow. But certainly, if that does not happen, there will have an impact on our cash flow. Whether or not the town can recoup that from the provincial government is yet to be known. You certainly, I'm sure, have heard on the news, various municipalities, various TransLink, for example, is making overtures that they're going to need a financial bailout soon. City of Vancouver has indicated this. I'm sure there's going to be other municipalities lining up shortly. And so it's, there's certainly an impact going to be felt. So with that, your worship, I'm really open to suggestions. Like most people that I've talked to, my cohorts are leaning towards a September 30th due date, but that could be like, it could be August 31st, September 30th. It's really up to council's wishes. Thank you, your worship.
Councilor Grace, I see you got your hand up.
Thank you, your worship. So In theory, I do support option 2. I wonder through the CFO what sort of financial position that's going to have us in by the end of December, if you feel that, you know, I guess, because in the report it said we'd be looking at borrowing, or are we just going to be taking from reserves to cover the deficit? And then what I had as a suggestion is I wonder, and it may seem a little counterintuitive, but I wonder if we can send the bills out with the same due date, but extend the late fees to a later date to sort of maybe more strongly encourage those who can pay to pay now. But if you can't pay, the late fees won't be incurred until a later date. So that's
through the chair, we do have the ability to do that. We can certainly, you know, when we bring our tax rates bylaw forward, that's the bylaw that hopefully will be coming forward on April 27th at our next council meeting. That's where we do, in the language in that bylaw, set the penalty due dates or when they get applied. So there is that ability to do that. We could certainly leave the due date as is and don't apply penalties for a period of time. It's really the optics of, you know, what we're trying to accomplish. So I'm not opposed to that. It's just a different way to look at it for sure.
And then as far as sort of if we do go with option 2, what our financial position will be at the end of December. I mean, will we sort of be where we would have been anyways at that point, and we're just sort of?
It's through the chair to Councillor Grice. It's very, you know, right now it's a little bit of, you know, balls up in the air, just simply because, you know, depending on whether or not we have to pay our school taxes on that time and regional district, and, you know, if we do have to pay them, then certainly I would recommend, well, one of two ways. Either we use our own investment funds to finance ourselves, or we use a line of credit from the bank, or we can also use, certainly we would explore any options as to moving forward to financing. We're not alone in this. All the municipalities are in the same financial predicament as.
And if I could follow up, do we have a window that this could be deferred till the next meeting to see if any of those deadlines have been moved by the province?
Yeah, you certainly do. Through the chair, sorry. You certainly do. You can defer this till the next meeting. We don't have to pass a tax rates bylaw until May 15th, I believe it is. We usually try to, the only reason I do have all the tax rates, I do know them now. We've received them all, other than the schools, but we don't have to pass them. They come in and we just apply them onto our tax. But in our bylaw, we can be ready for April 27th, so it can come back on April 27th. I know I brought this forward simply because council was kind of requesting this at our last meeting, as well as there's just a lot of talk in the media from the various municipalities of what they're going to do.
That's
Thank
it
you.
for me for now. Thank you.
Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. I did hear the word bylaw in there several times, and I was going to point out that the proposed motion doesn't cover that, and that it has to be done through bylaw. There are various options under sections 234, 235, 236 of the community charter regarding this. Would certainly like a little more in depth as to what our options are at the next meeting. Similarly, in the School Act, I believe, or somewhere else in the community charter, I couldn't remember where, basically says that if you switch to an alternate date process, that it allows the people to pay under either process. They could still pay July 2nd if they wish, or they can pay on the new due date, but they have to let us know which one. Each of the taxpayers has to let us know if they opt out of whatever program we want to do. Similarly, it also says in there that we can make agreements with other people that we collect taxes for, like the RDOS and the school board and the hospitals, and that we can make agreements with them to defer their payments as well. So that could also change the cash flow possibilities if they were open to those agreements. But that again is covered under the community charter in that taxation area. As well, I believe in the School Act, if we do change to where we change the dates and allow people to pay basically throughout that period of time, that it basically says that we will submit the money that we collect for the school board as we collect it, and that any money that we don't collect comes due at the end of the year. So there's a whole bunch of different things in play there, but it certainly needs to be done by bylaw as opposed to a resolution to move forward on this.
Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to the CFO, when someone is delinquent on their taxes, I assume we have to pay the RDOS and the school board, et cetera, on their due dates, and then it's up to us to collect. Is that the case?
Through the chair, that's absolutely correct. At the end of the year, the way the tax collection works is we have to pay all the taxes owing, for example, with the school tax to the province. So then after that, whatever money's owing is really up to us to collect.
Okay, and just a comment. I think that unless some of these large institutions that we're collecting for, like the RDOS and School District 53, unless they're going to agree to back up their dates, I'm not sure we should go forward with this. I think the town of Oliver has already made concessions in the amount of $400,000 to help our citizens through the economic struggles with COVID-19. And we can't do everything. I think the measures we've already instituted are more than a lot of towns, most towns are willing to do. But I would be in favor of, unless the RDOS and the school board and the other entities agree to pushing their dates back to September 30th, I would be in favor of just leaving the tax date the way it is, but pushing the penalties back so that a penalty would 5% on September 30th and 5% on December 31st. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thanks, Councillor Schwarzenberger. Councillor Bentamila.
Thank you. So along those same lines, really, I think personally, knowing that we don't have to deal with this right away, that we have until sometime in May, I would be more comfortable kind of sitting on it and waiting to see what the province does with some of those other things that we don't have control over the timing of, like the police tax, school, regional district, hospital, all of those that have been mentioned. I think, as Councillor Schwarzenberger pointed out, we did take action as soon as we could to provide immediate relief to our community, which was our goal and has helped sort of take care of things in the present and immediate future. And I think this is still a couple months off, and knowing that we have some time before we have to make any final decisions, I would just personally be more comfortable waiting to see what, again, the province does with those other things that we have to pay and their timelines before making our final decision.
Councillor Mattis, you had a follow-up comment?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I have no issues with what Councillor Ventimiglia is referring to and what Councillor Schwarzenberger is also talking about. But I would ask that staff do some preparation in the background so that if we do decide to do something, that we're prepared and ready and understand how the process works within the community charter and within the School Act as to what we're allowed to do. And also that they could inquire with the school board and with the RDOS as to whether we could have an agreement under the community charter to delay their payments. So that would give us more flexibility. Not saying we would, but it'd be nice to have it laid out if it's available so that we are ready to move if we need to.
Councillor Grice, did you have your hand? Or Councillor Bentamila?
Yeah, I do, but that's because I forgot to lower it. So thank you.
Okay. I guess my comments would be, yeah, I think that there's going to be, my guess is if the province is going to do something, we're going to hear about it very quickly. I know there's been discussion about the RDOS and the school district as well.
That would be Councillor Michelle.
I
Not
think
on
so.
mute.
My other comment, CFO, is I understand there is options for us to do a staggered payment of our taxes.
Staggered payment meaning,
You could collect half at January 2nd and the other half at another date to be determined. Looking at the community charter as well, you don't have to do all, it didn't appear to me that you had to do all your taxes at once, which could help us collect in the interim for like the RDOS.
oh, you're talking, yeah. The only one that I'm aware in British Columbia that does that is the city of Vancouver. And they do it under their charter, the Vancouver charter. The community charter does allow that. I'm not aware of any municipality doing that currently.
But it does allow it.
It does allow it. It just doubles up your administration, a lot of your costs.
Just trying to look at all options that, as you know,
Exactly.
the biggest challenge here is the having to pay the RDOS and the school tax before we get the money. It's an option to consider anyway. It's good to have all our options on the table, but waiting, you know, having some answers and some suggestions maybe for April 27th does sound like a good idea, because there may be some information coming out in the next couple of weeks that will help council with this decision. Any other comments, council?
Do we need to give staff direction, or is Doug good to go?
Well, from what I'm hearing from council is I'm going to come back. I'm going to review. I know the sections, I think it was 224, 225, or whatever the two sections are.
234, 235,
Yeah.
236, that area.
Yeah, with the alternative collection schemes, and talk to some of my fellow cohorts, and then come back with that, whether it's the April 27th meeting or the meeting thereafter. The only thing, I'm just got to do some more research too, because I know that we also have to, I got to touch base with the province, because the rural fire district, they have a different collection date than us. And so I got to just make sure how that impacts those guys as well, because usually we provide how much money I need from them. And so, yeah, I'll do some work for sure and come back to council.
CFO, did you have any discussion with all Asuyas? I was just wondering why they came up with September 18th. What's so magical about that date?
I really don't. I know when I was talking, I didn't actually talk on the phone with Jim Zackel, but I don't really know exactly why they chose that date. It might be because
It's the mayor's birthday.
maybe. One of the challenges we run into is tax sale date. Tax sale date this year, I believe, is September 28th. And that was one of the things that some of my cohorts were bringing up too. Well, what about the tax sale this year for those properties that are delinquent in taxes? And if you keep pushing your due dates back, how does that impact the tax sale? And, you know, it's one of those things, and to be in a, I think it's one of the least things for us to worry about at this point in time. I think we've got bigger fish to fry than a tax sale, but you know, it's certainly something that has to be considered, but I don't think it's that important personally.
Okay. I don't think we need a motion. It sounds like CFO has some thoughts on how to proceed, and we can just move on to the next item unless anyone objects. Next, we have a lease 6173 Kootenai Street, Dr. Evans Professional Medical Corporation. I will pass it over to the corporate officer whose report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report before council today is with regards to the lease at 6173 Kootenai Street. with Dr. Evans Professional Medical Corporation. The town of Oliver has an existing lease with the medical corporation, which expires December 31st, 2020. Staff and the medical corporation have been having some discussions with regards to their lease. As a leaseholder, they are wanting to prepare. They are asking that no changes to the lease agreement occur, except for changing the term to expire at December 31st, 2022. This gives them a couple more years for some additional discussion and work with the town of Oliver in this regard. So the recommendation before council is to authorize staff to enter into a lease modification agreement with Stephen Evans Professional Medical Corporation, or you can choose not to enter into a new lease modification, or you can refer back to staff for additional information. And the recommendation before council is to direct staff to enter into a lease modification agreement to extend the term from December 31st, 2020 to December 31st, 2022, and that council authorizes the town signing authorities to endorse the lease modification agreement. Thank you.
Any questions, comments on this, council? Seeing none, do we have a mover of the motion?
I'll move the motion.
I'll second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will ask the question. Does anybody object to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving on to our last item under business, the 2018-2022 strategic plan update. I'll pass it over to the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is before you to receive endorsement of the Oliver Strategic Plan as reviewed by Council in January of 2020. Staff updated the plan from the direction received in January, and the plan has been attached to this report for your consideration and review. It should be noted that due to the current COVID-19 situation, some of the dates have been adjusted, and I pointed out for you to review these dates, and we can further adjust them if you feel that they need to be adjusted. So, and then of course, we'll give you quarterly reports as per usual on the progress that we're making with these. So if council has any questions or any concerns with some of the dates, I'm ready to take some information from you. If not, then the recommendation to council is that the updated 2018-2022 strategic plan be adopted as presented.
I will move that council adopt the updated 2018-2022 strategic plan as presented.
I'll second.
Moved in second. Any further discussion, questions? Hearing none, I'll ask the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion carried. Moving to correspondence, April 14th, 2020 correspondence report. I will ask the corporate officer to present.
Thank you, Your Worship. The first item of correspondence for council's action this afternoon is an email that was received March 22nd, 2020 from Miss Kathy Peters with regards to Ontario's strategy to combat human trafficking, with the request to alert the Premier of British Columbia and the Solicitor General that British Columbia needs to make addressing this crime a priority. Is attached some information with regard to human trafficking for your information. The options before council is to direct staff to draft correspondence to the Premier and the Solicitor General to enforce the federal law and introduce provincial prevention education. Council may wish to defer to staff for additional information, or council may wish to receive and file.
Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Worship. So I would speak in favor of sending correspondence to the province. I think in sometimes in small towns, we feel like we're a little bit immune to these things, but this is an issue in our province. And so if we can do something as simple as writing a letter of support to bring it to the attention of the province and hopefully have some positive action taken against this issue, then I would be in favor of that. Thank you.
You want to move the motion, Councillor Grace?
Sure, if no one else has anything to say, I will move that council direct staff to draft correspondence to the Premier and Solicitor General to enforce the federal law and to introduce provincial prevention education.
Anyone want to second that?
Oh, you guys.
I'll second the motion so that we can vote on it.
Councillor Ventimiglia, any further discussion, questions? Seeing none, I will call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion carries.
Thank you, Your Worship. The second is correspondence that is for information only. The first one being from Mayor Rands of the District of Metosian regarding COVID-19 and indicating that testing is needed for first responders. And secondly, policy directives from the Liquor, Cannabis and Regulation Branch. And that's all in regard to the manufacture and sale of hand sanitizer from craft beer and spirits to hand sanitizer and changing the hours of sale and delivery at the retail outlets. So the motion is to receive the items listed in I3 and the weekly correspondence be received.
So moved.
Who moved? Seconded?
Second.
Seconded, Councillor Grace. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion's carried. Moving to reports. Airport Manager Activity Report for March 2020.
I'll move receipt.
Second.
Seconded. Any further questions? Nope. I will call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 2, the Building Activity Report for March 2020.
Move receipt.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. And the last one is the Fire Department Activity Report for March 2020.
Move receipt.
Moved, and I need a seconder.
I'll second.
Seconded. Call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving on to council reports. Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. I attended, I believe, 2 closed council meetings in the past 3 weeks and a couple of Oliver Tourism Association meetings, all by Zoom virtually. And that's it for me. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just the council meetings.
Okay. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, the same council meetings. Also, April 2nd, I attended or virtually attended a BC Economic Development Association conference call. The economic response and recovery was the theme of that call. So they've got some great resources on their website, bceda.ca/COVID-19. Really excellent resources for both businesses and communities if anybody wants to look at that. April 6th, I also was on a call with the BC Chamber of Commerce, chatting with some local business people as well as various levels of government. So that was a great call as well. And then today's meetings. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Grace. Councillor Ventimiglia?
That's me. Thank you. So I was in attendance for those couple of closed council meetings that were mentioned as well. On Wednesday, April 1st, I know I got out and I think a bunch of others did as well to watch that appreciation parade for frontline workers that went through the community. So that lights show up at the hospital and then a drive through town. It was quite nice to see and kind of fun to be a part of. Tuesday, I didn't write down a date. Tuesday, April something. Last Tuesday, I believe it was, the regional directors had a virtual update, much as we've been doing as a council. And we're getting prepared to have our first virtual meeting, which will be this Thursday. And I just wanted to point out that I have read a bit and heard a bit in the community, people starting to get a little bit anxious about out-of-towners coming this way for the fruit picking season. I was just sent a link earlier today. It's actually from the Mayor of Karamias, agsafebc.ca, a site that I haven't made my way through the whole site yet, but seems to have a lot of resources for both farmers as well as potential employees. So that might be a good place for people to start checking out if they have any questions. And that's the end of my report.
Thanks, Councillor Ventimiglia. I attended as well a number of Zoom meetings, Skype meetings. It was a good meeting with the Chamber and the Oliver Tourist Association. That was on April 6th. I had another one on Wednesday, the 8th, with the South Okanagan, the mayor's COVID update. So that was a really good conference or sort of meeting, conference call with all the mayors talking about all what they're doing in their communities and the challenges they're having. Everybody's communicating a lot these days, so which is really good, keeping everybody up to date. And the out of province fruit pickers are definitely something that's getting a lot of discussion these days. I think Loose Bay they're looking at potentially opening that up early. The RDOS is involved, Linda Larson's involved, Rick Knodl's involved, so they are looking at what they can do about getting it up and operating sooner and what kind of measures they can have in place. We did ask the minister last Thursday, myself, the mayor of Vesuvius and the mayor of Karamias specifically. We haven't heard anything back, so that leaves us with enforcing the provincial health orders through bylaw and RCMP if necessary. Hoping to get some more guidance on that, but I'm not sure that we're going to see much on the way, especially as far as provinces shutting down the border. That's about all, I guess, all I have to report at this time. Upcoming meetings, our next meeting will be April 27th, 2020, unless we have another EOC update next week, if we plan for that, to have some further discussion, interim discussion in between our regular council meetings. And I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Your worship,
Councillor Michelle?
Could I bring something up in the discussions that council was having, the due dates for taxes? I know the CFO brought up that Vancouver, and I read that in the Vancouver Sun as well, that they may be approaching the province for financial aid, or they might become insolvent, was the story in the Sun. That's how dramatic it was. I think that all municipalities in BC, if there is help for Vancouver, need to get that same amount of help. I mean, we just made some tough decisions, and we certainly don't want our taxpayers subsidizing Vancouver taxpayers if they get provincial money, because it's all our money that gets paid in provincial taxes. So I don't know if we want to send a letter as a town or just monitor it, and if there is help for the city of Vancouver, that we make sure that our citizens also receive help. I don't think it'd be fair for them to be subsidizing somebody else.
Thank you, Councillor Michelle. Yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of there's going to be more information coming out about this. It's in the press all the time now. There's lots of requests coming through. I know through the conference calls with the minister, that's been a question from multiple municipalities about delaying those dates for payment of the RDOS and the school tax, et cetera. I'm optimistic and hopeful that some announcements will be coming out. The challenge with the Vancouver is they're concerned that 30 or 25% of the people might not even pay their taxes at all. And I hear West Bank has done some modeling as well. So that is a real concern. It's one thing to delay the date, but what happens if people just outright aren't able to pay?
Yeah,
So
that's a decision the provincial government is going to have to deal with. But I think that if whatever they come up with, they can't have it as a patch meal basis. Otherwise, our citizens are subsidizing that. I mean, if they make a decision for helping communities, then they have to help all communities. Otherwise, it's just not fair. I mean, we can't. We'd have to speak up for our citizens and say we don't want them subsidizing West Kelowna or Vancouver. I mean, we're having to make very difficult decisions in Oliver as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, I'd like to just comment on the fruit pickers. I know I've read some comments that, oh, we should close the provincial borders. I can't emphasize strong enough that the people that come to help in this valley from Quebec pick most of the fruit. I mean, a lot of farmers bring in foreign labor, but they don't really. A lot of the harvest is done from people from Quebec, and unless our laid off people want to start working in orchards, then the fruit's going to go bad, and that's a food safety concern. We need to make sure that people have food, and fruit is food. I mean, we got to make sure that those people come here from Quebec, whether we have to enforce, like you say, with bylaws, social distancings or whatever. But I think I'd be very, very, very leery of trying to be as a town proactive in trying to stop that. I mean, that's a big part of our farm labor. I mean, the cherry crop won't be harvested in Oliver, Suyas, or anywhere else without those kids from Quebec coming here every year.
Any other closing comments? I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved, seconded. Does anyone object? Nope, we are adjourned. Thank you, Council.
Thank you.